Welcome to the second part of the audio story Murder by Arnold Bennett. If you have not gone through my previous audio story, that is part 1 of Arnold Bennett's Murder, then kindly do so because the link is available in YouTube as well as at my ITIL newsletter. You can visit ITIL by typing itil.substack.com, or you can search in YouTube by the keywords Murder by Arnold Bennett, narrated by Mrinmoy Majumdar. So let us begin part 2 of the story. That is what I think of her later, he proceeded, the cigarette between his teeth. You're helping her, are you? Very well. I don't say you're in love with her or she with you. I will make no wild statements. But if you aren't in love with her, I wonder why you're taking all this trouble over her. Do you go about the world helping ladies who say they're unhappy just for the pure sake of helping? Never mind. Emily isn't going to leave me. Get that into your head. I shan't let her leave me. She has money and I haven't. I have been living on her, and I would be infernally awkward for me if she left me for good. That is a reason for keeping her, isn't it? But you may believe me or not, it isn't my reason. She is right enough when she says I am very fond of her. That is reason for keeping her too. But it isn't my reason. My reason is that a wife is a wife, and she can't break her word just because everything isn't lovely in the garden. I have heard it said, I am unmoral, I am not all unmoral, and I feel particularly strongly about what is called the marriage tie. He drew the revolver from his overcoat pocket and held it up to view. You see this thing? You saw me buy it. Now you needn't be afraid. I am not threatening you, and it is no part of my game to shoot you. I have nothing to do with your going on. What I have to do with is the going on of my wife. If she deserts me for you or for anybody or for nobody, I shall follow her, whether it is to Copenhagen or Bangkok or the North Pole, and I shall kill her with just this very revolver that you saw me buy. And now you can get out. Fronting replaced the revolver and began to consume the cigarette with fierce and large puffs. Lomax Harder looked at the grim, set, brutal, scowling, bitter face and knew that fronting meant what he had said. Nothing would stop him from carrying out his threat. The fellow was not an argufier. He could not reason, but he had unmistakable grit and would never recoil from the fear of consequences. If Emily left him, Emily was a dead woman. Nothing in the end could protect her from the execution of her husband's menace. On the other hand, nothing would persuade her to remain with her husband. She had decided to go, and she would go. And indeed, the mere thought of this lady to whom he, Harder, was utterly devoted, staying with her husband and continuing to suffer the tortures and humiliations which she had been suffering for years, this thought revolted him. He could not think it. He stepped forward along the side of the billiard table and simultaneously Fronting stepped forward to meet him. Lomax Harder snatched the revolver which was in his pocket, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Fronting collapsed. With the upper of his body somehow balanced on the edge of the billiard table, he was dead. The sound of the report echoed in Harder's ear, like the sound of a violin string loudly twanged by a finger. He saw a little reddish hole in Fronting's bronzed right temple. Well, he thought, somebody had to die, and it is better him than Emily. He felt that he had performed a righteous act. Also, he felt a little sorry for Fronting. Then he was afraid. He was afraid for himself because he wanted not to die, especially on the scaffold, but also for Emily. Fronting, who would be friendless, and helpless without him. He could not bear to think of her alone in the world, the central point of a terrific scandal. He must get away instantly. Not down the corridor, back into the hotel lounge. No, that would be fatal. The window. He glanced at the corpse. It was more odd, curious than affrighting. He had made the corpse. Strange, he could not unmake it. He had accomplished the irrevocable. Impressive, he saw Fronting's cigarette glowing on the linoleum in the deepening dusk and picked it up and threw it into the fender. Lace curtains hung across the whole width of the window. He drew one aside and looked forth. The light was much stronger in the courtyard than within the room. He put his gloves on. He gave a last look at the corpse, straddled the window sill, and was on the brick pavement of the courtyard. He saw that the curtains had fallen back into the perpendicular. He gazed around. Nobody. Not a light in any window. He saw a green wooden gate, pushed it. It yielded, then a sort of entry passage. In a moment, after two half turns, he was on the marine parade again. He was a fugitive. Should he fly to the right, to the left? Then he had an inspiration, an idea of genius for baffling pursuers. He would go into the hotel by the main entrance. He went slowly and deliberately into the portico, where a middle aged hall porter was standing in the gloom. Good evening, sir. Good evening. Have you got any rooms? I think so, sir. The housekeeper is out, but she will be back in a moment. If you would like a seat. The manager is away in London. The hall porter suddenly illuminated the lounge, and Lomax Harder, blinking, entered and sat down. I might have a cocktail while I am waiting. the murderer suggested with a bright and friendly smile. A bronc. Certainly, sir. The page is off duty. He sees to orders in the lounge. But I will attend to you myself. What a hotel, thought the murderer, solitary in the chilly lounge, and gave a glance down the long passage. Is the whole place run by the hall porter? But of course, it is a dead season. Was it conceivable that nobody had heard the sound of the shot? Harder had a strong impulse to run away, but no, to do so would be highly dangerous. He restrained himself. How much? He asked of the hall porter, who had arrived with surprising quickness, tray in hand and glass on tray. A shilling, sir. The murderer gave him 18 pence and drank off the cocktail. Thank you very much, sir. The hall porter took the glass. See here, said the murderer, I will look in again. I have got one or two little errands to do. And he went slowly into the obscurity of the marine parade. Lomax Harder leaned over the left arm of the sea wall of the man-made port of Kwangate. Not another soul was there. Night had fallen. The lighthouse at the extremity of the right arm was occulting. The lights, some red, some green, many white, of ships at sea passed in both directions in endless processions. Waves plashed gently against the vast masonry of the world. The wind, blowing steadily from the northwest, was not cold. Harder, looking about, though he knew he was absolutely alone, took his revolver from his overcoat pocket and stealthily dropped it into the sea. Then he turned around and gazed across the small harbor at the mysterious amphitheater of the lighted town, and heard public clocks and religious clocks striking the hour. He was a murderer, but why should he not successfully escape detection? Other murderers had done so. He had all his wits. He was not excited. He was not morbid. His perspective of things was not askew. The hall porter had not seen his first entrance into the hotel, nor his exit after the crime. Nobody had seen them. He had left nothing behind in the billiard room. No finger marks on the window sill. The putting on of his gloves was in itself a clear demonstration that he had fully kept his presence of mind. No footmarks on the hard, dry pavement of the courtyard. Of course, there was the possibility that some person unseen had seen him getting out of the window. Slight, but still a possibility. And there was also the possibility that someone who knew Fronting by sight had noted him walking by Fronting's side in the streets. If such a person informed the police and gave a description of him, inquiries might be made. No, nothing in it. His appearances offered nothing remarkable to the eye of a casual observer, except his forehead, of which he was rather proud, but which was hidden by his hat. It was generally believed that criminals always did something silly, but so far he had done nothing silly, and he is convinced that, in regard to the crime, he never would do anything silly. He had none of the desire supposed to be common among murderers to revisit the scene of the crime or to look upon the corpse once more. Although he regretted the necessity for his act, he felt no slightest twinge of conscience. Somebody had to die, and surely it was better that a brute should die than the heavenly, enchanting, martyrized creature when his act had rescued forever from the brute. He was aware within himself of an ecstasy of devotion to Emily Franting, now a widow and free. She was a unique woman. Strange that a woman of such gifts should have come under the sway of so obvious a scoundrel as Franting. But she was very young at that time, and such freaks of sex had happened before and would happen again. They were a widespread phenomena in the history of the relations of men and women. He would have killed 100 men if 100 men had threatened her felicity. His heart was pure. He wanted nothing from Emily in exchange for what he had done in her defense. He was passionate in her defense when he reflected upon the coarseness and cruelty of the gesture by which Fronting had used Emily's letter to light his cigarette. Harder's cheek grew hot with burning resentment. A clock struck the quarter. Harder walked quickly to the harbor front, where was a taxi rang and drove to the station. A sudden apprehension. The crime might have been discovered. Police might already be watching for suspicious looking travelers. Absurd, still, the apprehension remained despite its absurdity. The taxi driver looked at him queerly. No imagination. He hesitated on the threshold of the station, then walked boldly in and showed his return ticket to the ticket inspector. No sign of a policeman. He got into the Pullman car where five other passengers were sitting. The train started. He nearly missed the boat train at Liverpool Street because, according to its custom, the Quanget flyer arrived 20 minutes late at Victoria. And at Victoria, the foolish part of him, as distinguished from the common sense part, suffered another spasm of fear. Would detectives, instructed by telegraph, be waiting for the train? No, an absurd idea. The boat train from Liverpool Street was crowded with travellers, and the platform crowded with senders off. He gathered from scraps of talk overheard that an international conference was about to take place at Copenhagen, and he had known nothing of it, not seen a word of it in the papers. Excusable, perhaps, graver matters had held his attention. Useless to look for Emily in the vast bustle of the compartments. She had her through ticket, which she had taken herself in order to avoid possible complications, and she happened to be the only woman in the world who was never late and never in a hurry. She was certain to be in the train. But was she in the train? Something sinister might have come to pass. For instance, a telephone message to the flat that her husband had been found dead with a bullet in his brain. The swift 2 hour journey to Harwich was terrible for Lomax Harder. We remembered that he had left the unburnt part of the letter lying under the billiard table. Forgetful, silly, one of the silly things that criminals did. And on Parkston Quay, the confusion was enormous. He did not walk, he was swept onto the great shaking steamer whose dark funnels rose amid whips of steam into the starry sky. One advantage, detectives would have no chance in that multitudinous scene unless indeed they held up the ship. The ship roared a warning and slid away from the quay, groped down the tortuous channel to the harbour mouth, and was in the North Sea. And England dwindled to naught but a string of lights. He searched every deck from stem to stem and could not find Emily. She had not caught the train, or if she had caught the train, she had not boarded the steamer because he had failed to appear. His misery was intense. Everything was going wrong, and on the arrival at Ishbog, would not detectives be lying in wait for the Copenhagen train? Then he described her, and she him. She too had been searching. Only chance had kept them apart. Her joy at finding him was ecstatic. Tears came into his eyes at sight of it. He was everything to her, absolutely everything. He clasped her right hand in both of his hands and gazed at her in the dim, diffused light blended of stars, moon, and electricity. No woman was ever like her, mature, innocent, wise, trustful, honest, and the touching beauty of her appealing, sad, happy face, and the pride of her carriage, a unique jewel snatched from the brutal grasp of that fellow who had ripped her Solomon letter in two and used it as a spill for his cigarette. She related her movements and he his. Then she said, "Well, I didn't go," he answered. "Thought it best not to. I am convinced it wouldn't have been any use." He had not intended to tell her this lie. Yet, when it came to the point, what else could he say? He told one lie instead of 20. He was deceiving her, but for her sake. Even if the worst occurred, she was forever safe from that brutal grasp, and he had saved her. As for the conceivable complications of the future, he refused to front them. He could live in the marvelous present. He felt suddenly the amazing beauty of the night at sea, and beneath all his other sensations was the obscure sensation of a weight at his heart. "I expect you were right," she angelically acquiesced. With this, I stop this part, the second part of Murder by Arnold Bennett. Next week, I will read the last part of this novel written by Arnold Bennett. If you like the reading of this part, please give a like or subscribe to my YouTube channel or to my newsletter itel.substack.com. So, see you next week and goodbye and good night for now. Thank you.